Hey folks, welcome to today's video. Well, I'm going to be talking about episode 4 of Alone. By far my favorite episode so far. I mean, I do get a kick out of watching me struggle and freak out a little bit, but having been there and having experienced it, it's, I'm over that part of it. That was pretty tough, but catching those 4 fish was just amazing. An amazing morale booster. It didn't make the cut, but I had said, and that validated my whole existence or my whole trip up to that point. I mean, if you go out and try to survive wherever you're at and you can't catch food, your survival is definitely limited. You're not gonna make it too far. You can go without food for a long time, but you know, I mean, if you're going to put your skills to use, catching food is definitely a big part of that skill set. I mean, obviously water, shelter, fire, stuff like that. But I mean, if you're talking long-term survival, you got to eat. And I ate pretty good that night. Like I said, I caught 4 fish. I filleted those fish up. And at that point, I wasn't worried about preserving them. I was hungry. So I ate all those fillets that night, and I mean, I was stuffed. I remember thinking, at first it was just like the most, well, it always was, the most fantastic tasting fish around that I've had. I mean, those were some good fish, but towards the end, I was very full. I was force feeding myself, basically. I had to choke it down. The skins on those fish I've never seen fish like that before. I tried to scale them, and the scales were actually their skin. It was very weird. There was no scaling them. You couldn't. If I scaled, I mean, I really went to town on it and tried to scale it, and it actually went through all the way to the meat. It was a skin that was made out of scales, and I wasn't going to eat the skin the way that was. I think I tried it. I actually roasted those. The skin was extremely tough, and I had to poke a hole in the skin with my knife and then thread a skewer through it. And I roasted it over a fire, and the scales of the skin actually kind of expanded and turned into like a dragon skin. It was the dangest thing, and when I first saw it, I was like, what the heck is this? And I think I tried to taste it, and it was just, I mean, it'd be like eating just straight up scales. It just wasn't any good. But one thing that was good about it was it held the meat on the fillet real well. Sometimes you see folks making an elaborate grill setup where you have maybe 3 or 4 sticks this way and 3 or 4 sticks that way, sandwiching the fillets between the green saplings or whatever. I did not need to do that at all. Though that meat held on to those fillets just fine. So after I was done with that, went ahead and like I explained in the episode, I took the carcass of the fish and cut it up into pieces and then boiled it. And I tried to boil it all night long. I tried to wake up every so often and add wood to the fire so that I could have a bone soup the next day. And that way I could utilize every last bit of that catch that I had. So I think it worked out pretty good. You saw me make a spear. That spear was, when you make a spear like that, it's definitely good for, you know, if you were to see something. You know, I've used them in my area for frog gigs, and they're very functional. And then the other end was, you know, I carved into a point just for, that way I'd have a spear, have something for protection if I needed it. But really what it did was, it was a fantastic walking stick, and you can kind of see me walking along. I was wearing my water shoes, and those rocks are just really, you know, slippery and jagged and just hard to walk across. So having that stability point, that stable point there, was really made a big difference. It was pretty cool. So yeah, I lost a little fish in there. I'm gonna be the first to admit that I've never used a gill net before. I mean, I don't even think they're legal anywhere, just about, unless you're you know, a native person or something, or, you know, I suppose a commercial fisherman. But I've never used a gill net like that. Well, I went up to it and I just figured that little fish would be caught for sure, and I picked it up and went right down, right back into the water. So that was a very disheartening moment, because that was before I had caught the fish. And I mean, even though it was a little fish, I was really looking forward to it. It's hard to describe how hungry I was at that point. I have taken, it's no secret, I've taken Dave Canterbury's advanced class. And during that advanced class, I basically didn't eat. I had a partner at one point where he and I split a frog, just a little regular frog. So we both got, you know, one front leg and one back leg. So basically I didn't eat for 3 days. So I knew what my body could handle. I knew what it was like. But at the end of the 3rd day and going into the 4th day, or however many days it was where I hadn't eaten, it is so taxing on you. It's just hard to describe. You can't think properly. Everything you do is just crazy hard. And like I said in the episode, I was getting some food, but I mean, we're talking limpets that are, you know, quarter size usually, and then you boil those and the shell separates. And you know, I know some people said that they've eaten them raw, and some people didn't clean out what I consider the guts, but I cleaned the guts off of them. So by the time you're done, you started with a quarter size, you know, piece of shellfish. By the time you got done cooking it and cleaning it, you're left with like a dime size. So I would collect, you know, 15 or 20 of them, or 10, whatever. I mean, it was just barely anything. It was just, I mean, it was worth it, but it was just really small. And when I said that I was so tired of the periwinkles, I'll tell you why. They tasted better than the limpets, and they were actually quite good. They were actually really, really good. But they have this thing on the, so basically the periwinkle, in my estimation, is basically like a sea snail. And it has a little thing, I can't remember what it's called, but a little round thing that it attaches to the rock with. And after you cook it, you have to, well, first of all, you have to dig that thing out of the shell, and then you cut that part off, the part that goes to the shell. It's like a hard disc type thing. And then once again, I scraped off the guts. So out of a, you know, good size periwinkle, which like a good size one would probably be about as big as my thumb here, probably, you know, an inch long, something like that. I mean, you would get, once again, probably not even the size of a dime's worth of meat out of that. You'd get maybe the size of your pinky nail, you know, really small portions. And they took a long time to prepare, the way that I was preparing them, you know, and cleaning them properly, getting rid of that disc. And so, I mean, it just, the calorie, it was probably costing me more calories to eat them than it was what I was getting out of them. Probably not, but still, it was a hard deal to collect all those shellfish and process them down the way that I felt I needed to process them down, and then just to get hardly anything out of them. So basically, that's a long way of saying I was hungry as heck. I mean, I can't even describe to you how good that fish tasted. It was, I've never been that hungry ever. It was an incredible experience. All right, once again, I'm not going to go into the other folks' setups or anything in too much detail, but it is fun to see the other folks and see what they've done. Right off the bat, I have to say, holy crap, Mike. you basically are, what's that, Smith Family Robinson or whatever it's called. Holy smokes. And it's interesting to see what everybody's area looked like. I mean, Nicole has this amazing lagoon type thing, but she has to deal with, you know, Mama Bear and her cubs. So she definitely had a lot more open, free-ranging type area than I did. But once again, she was dealing with bears, seemed like on a daily basis. And going back to Mike, did you see everything Mike found on the beach? I mean, he found, I didn't even know how many jugs he found. And if you go back to Mary Kate, she had like a plastic table she found or something that was in her shelter. I couldn't really see it, but just the amount of items that these folks found. It didn't look like Nicole so far. I don't think she's really found anything, or at least they haven't shown it. David found cordage, a bunch of cordage it looked like. He was able to make a net. What an amazing net needle he made, right? Just out of a stick, carved down. It looked like a commercially made net needle. I mean, that's awesome. I have experimented and been taught how to make a net like that, but it's an intricate process, and if you don't, it's one of those skills where you need to learn it inside and out, and then probably practice it in order to keep that skill. I've lost it. I was only shown a little bit, and so I don't know how to make one. I can make one just by making, I've got a video up I think where I make a ridge line or whatever, a line, and then drape cordage off of that and then just tie it together. I find that way to be faster for me because I'm inexperienced with the other method. But anyway, that was an awesome net needle. That was really cool. I felt bad for him with, I saw that pot lean and I was like, oh no, man. But I felt bad for him with having lost his water like that. I mean, I'm you know, all of us have lost something into the fire before. Didn't see anything of Randy and didn't see anything of Jose. I'm not sure why that is. The producers have their reasons. And, you know, I'll say this too. Watching my footage sometimes, I see myself like this, right? Like half in and half out of the frame, and I'm thinking, I thought I did a pretty good job. I mean, I'm semi-experienced with making videos. I mean, I've got a couple hundred of them up now, so I usually can put myself in the middle of the frame. And you know, one point the camera was, and they can pick and choose what footage they want, but I mean the footage was of the trees way up high, and thinking to myself, holy crap, I thought I did awesome at filming, but obviously not as awesome as I thought. So anyway, that's just kind of a side note. I was surprised at how off some of my footage was. Like making that spear, I would have thought I would have had that baton right in the middle of the viewfinder, but you know, there again, when you're hungry and tired and hungry, sometimes I probably looked up and was like, I'm doing the best I can, you know. I'm not gonna sit there and, I mean, I tried hard, man, but filming it while you're doing it it's one thing when you're doing it, but filming it too is crazy hard. Crazy hard. If you try hard to film correctly, it's hard, really hard. So, Tracy, you know, Tracy, it seemed like most of us were dealing with some issues from our past in one way or another. I don't know about a couple of them if they were dealing with issues, but I knew Tracy was, and I was a little bit, but not near the extent she was. And it was, you know, it was just a hard deal. It was her call to make, and you know, I felt bad for her. I mean, did you see her shelter? She had all these nice support poles, and I mean, she had a heck of a shelter. It wasn't like she wasn't doing things. She was doing just fine. It's just, you know, that bear encounter and just dredging up her past was just, she made the choice to call it. And when you are by yourself for that long with nothing to keep you occupied, your mind goes to some crazy places, and it's, you'll dwell on some stuff big time. A couple of folks have asked me questions on Facebook regarding the show. One of them was I cooking in my shelter? Yes, I was cooking in my shelter. They told us not to. I knew I shouldn't. I really didn't have the energy to do anything different. I heard what I thought was bears the first few days, well, like one time, and after that I didn't see up to that point any reason to not cook in my shelter, because I would have had to walk all the way down that beach, or cook right there at that beach, and by that time it was, well, you saw in the footage, it was almost 9 o'clock at night, and all I wanted was to cook and then just basically roll right over and go right to sleep. So it was a risk that I decided to make. Now if I was in grizzly country or something like that, that would have, or if I'd have seen a lot of signs of bears more than just that one time I heard them, up to that point, I definitely would have done things differently, but it was a gamble I decided to take, and that's on me. So, also another question I had was, did I use the guts for bait? I don't know if we'll see anything next episode regarding that or not. We'll just have to wait and see if I did or not, or if I just, whatever I did with it. So, now going back to those lines that I put out, The first thing I did was put out my gill net. I figured my gill net would be a set it and forget it type thing. It's something I did not have to bait. It was just something that set it and forget it. They didn't show me setting it up. They don't need to show 10 people setting up 10 different gill nets. You see a gill net, you see it. They move on. That was a hard thing to set up, okay? I waited until the tide went out as far as it would, because I wanted to get my gill net as deep as I could. I was still in, the water was still lapping at my boots when I was putting that gill net out. And to prep for that, I had cut my logs, my support poles, and had everything ready, and then I went out and set my gill net up. My area was basically rocks, gravel type stuff on top of bedrock, or on top of, yeah, bedrock. So I couldn't drive my stakes into the ground. So I had to wedge them as best as I could into cracks and crevices of that cliff right there, and then take other heavier rocks and wedge them up against my support poles. And then after that, what I did is, those gill nets, they come with cordage across the top so that you can, and across the bottom so that you can tie them off to things. And I took another rock and set it up on the cliff and anchored that whole side with that rock. And then I had to go find another suitable location. You know, I spread my gill net out, find another suitable location, and then pile rocks around that. It took me 30 seconds to describe it. Probably took me an hour and a half to do it. I mean, it took a long time. It's very labor intensive. When, you know, Nicole was, her area was a little bit different than mine. She was able to pound stakes in. I was not able to do that, so I had to make do with what I had. And it's hard to describe carrying these rocks in the middle of the night when you haven't eaten and you're tired. And I climbed that hill all day trying to find a shelter location, and then to come down at night and set that gill net up. It was a taxing deal. This survival thing isn't just laying in your sleeping bag and having deer come up to you so that you can eat them. You know, it takes work, and it takes a lot of work. The lines that I set out, I only had 4 lines set up. That took me a night of activity to get those 4 hooks set out, the 2 lines. And it wasn't like it took me all night, but you only have a short window to work in. With the tide goes out, and then it seemed like it was ready to come back in. As soon as it was out, I mean, it was coming back in, and you never knew when you were going to hit a rogue wave. They seem to come every, I don't know, some people have said probably every 7th wave, or I don't know how it works, but every once in a while you gotta, you know, you get a couple small ones, and then every once in a while you gotta look up and make sure there's not a wave coming. So same thing, I had to stick those, the ends of my lines in rock crevices, and then pile more rocks on top of it. And with the surf always coming in and always breaking there, it wasn't like Kauai surf, but I mean, it's definitely moving water. Moving water is a force to be reckoned with. And I needed to make sure that I anchored those good enough so that I wouldn't lose, let's say I got a fish, I definitely wouldn't want to lose my fish, but I wouldn't want to lose my hooks at all either, because it wasn't like they were going to resupply me with hooks. You had a finite amount, and if you lost them, that was on you. So, you know, I would have rather had 20 hooks out, but I was working at getting more hooks out, and to be able to get 4 fish was just amazing. Another question I had was, what did I use for bait? Well, same thing, those limpets and periwinkles. I mean, that's what was there. I figured that's what the fish were eating. The periwinkles had that little disc on their face or whatever. I threaded the periwinkles through there, and then threaded the hook through that disc to try to keep that on the hook as best as I could. The limpets didn't hold on as well as the periwinkles did, and it usually took a couple of periwinkles to bait my hook, and so that's how I did it. I said a couple things regarding Lucas and Alan on last night's episode. First of all, I'm not going to eat a slug. I probably should have, but I had a stronger stomach when I was younger. Nowadays, I'm not going to eat worms, I'm not going to eat bugs. I was weighing the risk of puking versus the amount of calories I would get from that slug. I mean, they're pretty nasty. I remember watching last season, they said they had some sort of brain-eating parasite too, and I mean, I know that I would have cooked it correctly and I would have been fine, but just it's a mental game. We, as Americans, mostly don't eat bugs and stuff like that, whereas in other countries they do, and it's no big deal for them. I wasn't raised on eating bugs, and it's pretty repulsive to me now, and especially them slugs. They were nasty, so I wasn't going to eat them. As far as building a boat, I really didn't have a lagoon type area to build a boat. First of all, I could have practiced probably and made one maybe. And when I say probably, I mean that's a slight possibility I could have struggled through trying to make one. I didn't have an extra tarp to use for that. I was using my tarps for my sleep system, so I didn't want to break down my tarp and re-pull it back out again. But really, I didn't want to take the chance with those waves coming in, and my luck, I'd have drowned myself probably. I just didn't feel, I was weighing the risk versus reward. And on whatever day that was, day 8 or whatever, I still hadn't exhausted all the possibilities of those long lines or the trot lines. So I wanted to exhaust those possibilities, and I basically dismissed, once I saw my area, I had thought about it, making a boat, but it just wasn't in the cards for me. And I didn't have the area to do it, I didn't think, not with the waves like they were. Someone also, I think, asked me about fish in the creek that was right there. That creek was really small. There were no fish in that creek. There weren't even any minnows. I had a couple of little pools that I could look at, and there wasn't anything in there. When it was small, it was really, really small. The very first episode showed the creek and a little tiny waterfall, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, and it was at times a trickle coming down. So, and then when it rained, it got quite a bit larger. You could see from the footage, one of the shots of it, it was quite a bit larger. But there weren't any minnows or anything in there. There weren't any frogs that I saw in there either. There just wasn't tadpoles. There wasn't anything in that creek. No crawdads. I was hoping for crawdads or something. I didn't see anything. All right. Well, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to post them in the comments. If I can answer them, I will. I can answer everything up till episode 4, and nothing beyond, if there is a beyond. So one thing I'd like to give a shout out to the Wicked Salmon. The Wicked Salmon is the gentleman on the boat there. That's his boat. He has been extracting folks, and he knew his way around the water. I felt very comfortable that if I needed something, they'd be there. And you could tell when it was midnight and they came out and got Tracy. So that was, huge shout out to him. Super awesome guy. He does charter fishing up in Canada, so if you're looking to go fishing up there, I'd contact him. TheWickedSalmon.com. Alright folks, hope you liked the video. Take care.